Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Dennis Kucinich. Dennis served as a mayor of Cleveland, Ohio from 1977 to 1979, in the Ohio Senate from 1995 to 1997, and for 16 years in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1997 to 2013. And he ran twice for the Democratic nomination for the U.S. presidency. Dennis, thank you so much for being here today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So Dennis, I've been reading your book and it reads like a political thriller. I mean, the plot is similar to all the other movies I have seen before. There's this big utility company or corporation who tries to buy the politician. The politician refuses. And then when the politician refuses, they try to kill him. And you survive to tell the story, and now you're sharing it with us in your book, The Division of Light and Power. Now, the one thing that I found astonishing is that you started your political career at age 23, at an age where people are just wondering, which girl I'm going to date, how am I going to pay for my student debt? And at that time, you were already knocking on doors trying to get elected. So I wonder if we could start with that time period of your life. At age 17, 18, what gave you self-confidence to say, I can do something for my town?
Well, I believe that our lives do not belong just to ourselves, that our lives are about the community, and that we need to give something to the community as we are given the support to be able to live. All the things that surround us, all the beauty that we have, we did not create, others did. And so we have the obligation to keep giving back. So I decided that my life was going to be of service. And at an early age, I decided that it would be in public service. Now, keep in mind, before I got into politics, I did many different types of jobs. I worked as a caddy at a golf course. I was a newspaper copy boy. I was a stock boy. I was a copy editor. I did many other jobs. But I had this idea that I wanted to get into politics. So at age 20, I ran for city council. I was elected 2 years later. I won the second time around. And the whole thing was about helping other people, being of service. And that, of course, set me on the path to election to council, and that's where the story begins. The book opens up where I've just been elected to city council. I'm in downtown Cleveland with my wife. We're shopping at Christmas time, and all of a sudden, all the lights go off.
Okay,
no
well, I believe that you had this set of belief. Number one, how at age 23 you developed this set of belief? Because even if many people think and believe the same thing, we are so busy with just surviving, with paying our bills. You were going to school, you had at one time 2 full-time jobs while going to school. So many people have all this grandiose idea of wanting to help society, but reality takes over and people just have to pay their bills and whatever, go out on a date from time to time.
Well, I have those passions as well. But for me, to be of service to others, to try to make government work for people, to represent people, to be their voice, to stand up, to speak out, that all of those things were part of my beginnings. And, when John Kennedy was president, I heard his voice at his inaugural. He said, let the word go forth from this time and place that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans. And I, of course, thought he was talking to those of us who were teenagers at the time. But I felt this call. And I think that every one of us has a call towards something. And my calling was towards public service. And once you have that and you answer it, your life changes automatically, as it does when you answer any kind of a call, to military service, to religious life, to be a doctor, a nurse, to anything, whatever. Whenever we receive
Colin.
this calling, this knowledge of what it is we're supposed to do with our lives, and so I acted on that.
Okay, so going back to that period of your time, of your life, I have another question. You were, you don't come from a family with a lot of money. In fact, you were poor. I read that you even slept in your car from time to time. You had all these many jobs that you were doing in order just to survive. Now, I tend to believe that the American dream is alive, that someone from nowhere, from poverty, can pick up and build a future for themselves and their family, although that dream seems to be more opaque nowadays. But I wonder how much is it possible to pick up from nowhere and attain a high career, a big career or financial independence, and how much is difficult nowadays?
I think this is really a question for every individual, because we're born into certain circumstances, and many places it's very class defined, and the minute that you're born, this is your place and you stay in your place. For me, there were so many times in my life I could have fallen through the cracks, like some of my siblings did, like many of my friends did, where they didn't have opportunities or didn't take up opportunities, didn't get the education. I was very fortunate. I'm one of the few who actually made it out, and oh, am I aware of that. But when I got into public life, it wasn't as though I'm up here going, "Hi, everybody, look at me." No, I remember where I came from. It's very important to remember where we come from. And that life experience that I had growing up, where my parents we didn't own a home. And by the time I was 17, the family grew. And as renters, we kept having trouble finding place for a growing family. So I lived in 21 different places by the time I was 17, including a couple cars. Now that experience was ingrained in my thinking about my obligation to people who are in similar circumstances. Today, in my community, there's more poverty than ever. So we must not only have compassion, which can be intellectual, but experiential compassion that comes from actually having been there, having lived that, and then having the opportunity to move up. Gives one an opportunity to be of greater service than you could ever imagine. Because when we have the opportunity to make a difference, we must remember those who have not been as fortunate, who maybe had never got the job they needed to support a family, who don't have decent housing, who don't have good health care, who are trying to ask, how can I do it? Now, I will tell you, I believe that it's possible for people to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. But we live in a society where somebody's stealing the people's boots. And so it's very difficult to move up. And so
Right.
my whole life has been about trying to show that it's possible for people to be lifted up. In my inauguration as mayor, I gave a speech where I said, I remember where I came from, and now I have this chance to be part of the American dream. The truth is, the American dream is shut off from more and more people. For more and more people, it's just, it seems to be something that cannot be obtained, and that's not right.
And it's to the next generation to help make those dreams possible for everyone. Now, let me ask you, so when you got into politics, of course, you got in with the dream to shake things up, to help for the community. But once you were in the inside, your colleagues and co-workers were saying, well, it's nice to have those grandiose dreams, but now you are in the inside. You do a favor here and we pay with a favor there. You can do well in politics without doing anything illegit. Now,
Right.
now you held your high standards at age 23. You know, at that age, I could have been bought with, I don't know, with a lollipop. And yet you are holding on to the standards. So I wonder, how is it you managed to keep it all together? I mean, the first gift that you received was an apron and some chili paper, innocent gift that anyone would say, wow, you know, thank you so much for thinking of me. But you say, no, thank you. I cannot take this. So how do you develop this integrity that is just so even hard to believe? It's something that I only see basically in just the movie theaters.
Well, I think that for every one of us, we have to look at the trajectory of our lives. And at a very early age, I was given a religious education. But what I found a value in it was not so much the religious side as the ethical side, as the difference between right and wrong, as the importance of doing the right thing at all times, even if no one's looking. And that was drilled into me, you know, but I accepted it. It fit, you know, it felt right for me. And not, you know, not worried about, you know, whether one goes to hell or not. That's beside the point, because the question is whether we can make of this life a heaven, whether we can stand for things in this life, to whether we can fight for the right without question or pause, as you know, the words in Men of La Mancha. And so I really I came into public life with this sense of doing the right thing, and I'm not being afraid to do the right thing, of standing up and speaking out. You know, when I was going to this Catholic school, I'd read about all the saints and the martyrs. Of course, I had no thought of ever being a saint and no interest whatsoever in being a martyr. And yet, when you stand for something, you do take a risk. As I found out later on, as the book shows, when I started my campaign to save our municipal electric system. So, you know, it is about childhood. It's about my parents who, well, they never had much. They always lived humbly. And, you know, I suppose one of the reasons why I could never be bought is because when I was growing up, we never relied on anything material. We didn't know if we're going to have a roof over our head one day to the next. So when you rely on materiality for your comfort, for your security, and it's taken away, or the threat to take it away comes, that can move you. But I never had that. And I never became attached to material things. And part of that was spiritual, and part of that was just situational, the way I grew up. And I must say, you're one of the few people who has probed into this area, which to me is central to the story, because how is it that I came to that and took the road I took? Why? How did that happen? And it happened because of the way I was raised, because of my spiritual education, and because I put spiritual principles into practice. So the book, in a sense, is about spiritual realism as well.
Well, I asked about this because this is a debate that I have inside of my head all the time. I want to always stand for the right thing, but let's say I'm doing my taxes and I could just exaggerate my expenses. So now I'm having this debate in my mind, and this debate goes in the mind of many people every day, in the most smallest thing. You know, a cashier give you a more change that she needed to give you. Okay, so do we have that debate? Oh, she made a mistake. Do I keep this extra dollar or not? So, you know, it's different magnitude for different life occasion, but everyone goes to the same debate of how much.
I think that's right. I think that's right, and it's very human, very natural. If we get attached, though, if the material world becomes the end all and be all of our existence, and the acquisition of material wealth becomes our big goal in life, if you choose politics as a route, that kind of thinking becomes problematic. So I never got into that. I mean, and it doesn't mean that, and after I left office as mayor, we had some very tough times. I can tell you, I mean, but because of my childhood experiences, I've learned that you get through it. No matter how bad things are, there's always a tomorrow. Hang in there. Don't quit. Don't, and that's where faith comes in. Because none of us can walk in faith and fear at the same time. We must have a very powerful faith that we can get through anything and just persevere. Don't quit. And so that's kind of how I'm made. And when the biggest banker in Ohio, one of the biggest, wealthiest banks in America, told me that I had to sell our municipal electric system to this private utility in which the bank was heavily invested. And if I didn't, he was going to put the city into default, and I knew my political career would be gone. To me, I had to make a decision to protect the people's right to own an electric system, but I also had to have faith that somehow, however long it took, people would find out what happened and the truth would be known, and that things would be okay. It took a long time for that to happen. But today I get the chance to write about my experience, share it with people all over the world, and let people know that it is possible to stand up for what's right, to do it fearlessly, to do it with courage, to do it with the strength of many, just by defying power, which seems omnipotent, in the words of the poet Shelley. We must have this very human ability to take a stand and to not relent and to not be pushed around by forces which try to crush individuals every day, which try to impose on us a certain way of thinking, a certain way of living. I believe in freedom and the fullest expression of it, as is seen in the book, the right to make decisions without being threatened, intimidated, or extorted.
Well, the only reason why this book is a story is because you buck against the system. But at the same time, you tell us that this is not unique to Cleveland, Ohio, that this is something that goes on in many cities or counties in the country, and that whether it's a utility company or a bank or financial institution or whatever, there is the standard practice of you rub my back, I rub your back. And well, you tell us it's prevalent, but I wonder how prevalent is it in the United States to have these big corporations running the town?
Well, it's not unusual because what I said at the beginning of the book is, everyone thinks that City Hall in Cleveland is this building on 6th and Lakeside. But when I got in, I found out that City Hall was in the boardroom of the banks, was in the boardroom of the utility monopolies, was in the meeting rooms of the mob. City Hall was there. So there were different elements making decisions that affected the people. They called themselves City Hall, but they were really making the decisions to enrich themselves. So the book essentially identifies that government works. The question is, who is it working for? And in city after city, government's working for real estate combines or one monopoly or another, and basically turns the keys of the city over to that group and lets them make decisions for their benefit and against the interests of the public. This is why utility rates are so high, why water rates are high, why people pay a premium for food, on and on and on. So, this book becomes important because it shows you from an insider's point of view. I walk the reader all the way through this and let the reader know how the system works, not just in Cleveland, but you can apply this to anywhere.
Right.
It doesn't mean that everyone who's in politics is dishonest, but it does mean that a system is set up to take the power of the people and use it to help a few at the expense of the many. And this is how America works. And today with campaign finance, where money can come in out of nowhere and try to wipe somebody out, and it's all legal because of the Supreme Court decisions, it's very difficult. It doesn't mean it's impossible to fight the system. And we can still change. I still believe, even at this point, after I've been doing this for 54 years, feel like I'm in a time machine, okay? I still believe it's possible to change the system, but only one person, it's not just that one person can make a difference. Only one person must stand up to begin with. It always starts with one person. Question is, are you that person? Anybody watching out there, are you that person who will take a stand, who will see what's going on in your community, who will say, wait a minute, that's not right, and then call it as you see it and get involved and get others involved too. So, that the book's about that as well.
Okay, I have one more question. So there was an assassination attempt. Someone tried to kill you. I wonder how you had the courage to continue fighting, knowing that your life is in jeopardy. I mean, our survival instinct is so powerful, and not only for ourselves, but our families and those close to us. And of course, the assassination attempt was against you, but there's always a risk that they could try to do harm to somebody you love, and which is a very effective tactic of coercion. So how do you have the courage to continue fighting after that?
Well, first, keep in mind, it's not that I wasn't aware of it. I was very aware of it, and I never talked about it publicly. Now that I've written a book, I talk about it. There were several assassination attempts, and there was one plot. And all this has been verified by government documents and investigations at not just a local level, but a federal level, a state and federal level as well. Here again, the idea of walking in faith and not fear. I have great faith. And the idea of, there's a song that talks about that, and it says, be not afraid, I'm with you always. And the idea of a spiritual presence exists in our lives. And I believe that it can and often does protect us. And if we are true to ourselves and true to our mission in life, that we find ourselves surrounded by circumstances that others would not be. We find ourselves protected. I also believe that courage, even the slightest courage, opens all doors. That a little bit of courage will create extraordinary openings. So, if one of the things if you have the a print copy of the book, you'll see a picture of me on my high school football team. I was a 4'9" varsity quarterback, okay? Now, I was always practicing this physical testing against the odds all the time, from the time I was little. And I never knew it would come in handy when I got into politics, but it did. So you just have to, I reached a point in life where I could not be bought, I could not be bossed, and I could not be intimidated. And if you take a stand and people know that, they just think, well, we either have to deal with this guy, or as they thought back then, we have to do something else. I'm talking to you from my home right now, where a high-powered rifle shot missed my head by a fraction when I began the campaign to save our municipal electric system. And later on, when I became mayor, police intelligence informed me that this was about the municipal electric system, that they were trying to kill me to get me out of the way so they could take over the city's electric system, because I was the only one standing in the way of this utility monopoly. So, live life courageously. It's an interesting journey. And I don't criticize anyone who doesn't, but I will tell you that today I am more convinced than ever that if we have faith and we're strong and we have courage, we can change anything. You know, there's no limit to, you want to change the world, it begins with each of us, and we have to be strong in order to do that.
Well, I certainly feel some of your courage and honesty coming through our mediums of communication. And I'm sure some of our listeners will appreciate that. I hope to be more courageous myself and more honest as well. I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book and where can people follow you?
The book is called The Division of Light and Power. The Division of Light and Power. And you could just, type it in online and you'll be able to get it anywhere. You can get your local bookstores to get it. I just want to add one note. The root word of courage is a French word, cœur. It's heart. And the heart knows everything and it sees everything. And to practice strengthening one's heart is to actually practice the potential of exercising courage as well. So I thank you for this heartfelt interview, for your very deep questions about how do these things happen? How about the individual? Because you could talk about where someone stands on an issue, ask them where they stand with themselves. That'll tell you a lot more. So I'm so grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
It's me who thank you. I want to be at least as half as courageous as you. Until next time, thank you very much.